the caravans were actually being looted by the Muslims, whether they were actually plundering the caravans. And the vast majority of scholars have written that yes, they were, because their possessions were stolen while they were in Mecca. So while the Muslims had left some of their possessions in Mecca, this was actually stolen by the Quraysh. So they said that, you know what, because we're in a state of war and because they've stolen our possessions, we're going to go ahead and stop these caravans from being plundered. This is the vast majority of scholars. However, it's a very, very good question. If you're interested in knowing more about this subject, there's a book written by Allama Shibli Nu'mani, probably one of the best seerah books ever written. It's 5 volumes, written in about 100 years ago. It's called Seeratul Nabi. In volume 2, you will find a great deal of discussion on this, and his opinion is very different from the vast majority of scholars. And he openly says that I disagree with the vast majority of scholars that they were not being plundered because there's no hard, authentic evidence to prove that they were. There was intelligence gathering, but there's no evidence that there was plundering. So he has a long discussion on this. I suggest you look at volume 2 of Seeratul Nabi. Shibli Nu'mani. Shibli, S-H-I-B-L-I, Nu'mani, N-U-M-A-N-I. Sometimes it's spelled Nomani, N-O-M-A-N-I. It's called Seeratul Nabi, okay? Co-authored. It's originally in Urdu, 8 volumes, been translated into English, 5 volumes. Yes. Alright, let us begin our class today. Bismillah, alhamdulillah, wa salatu wa salamu ala rasulillah, wa ala alihi wa sahbihi ajma'in, amma ba'd. Alright, before we begin, we ask Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala to teach us that which will benefit us and allow us to benefit from that which will taught us, which He's taught us. We ask Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala to keep our tongues quiet while the teacher is speaking. And we ask Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala to prevent us from learning anything that will harm us. Ameen. We're talking about alright, so Battle of Badr. So the cause, okay? Some of the causes with regards to the Battle of Badr. So keep in mind, a Meccan army of 1,000 people was dispatched. Okay, why? To protect the caravan of Abu Sufyan that was returning back from Syria loaded with merchandise. This is one of the biggest caravans that they've ever sent out. Now the Muslims set out and they dispatched an army simply to intercept the caravan. So if you're going to intercept the caravan, you're not actually going to prepare for war. So they were not fully prepared. They had weapons, they were ready to go and take the caravan, because there's obviously going to be some people, but they were not planning for an attack. After Abu Sufyan found out about it, he sent an envoy to the Quraysh and said, look, I've found out that Muhammad and his army are coming to me. So come and defend your caravan. So they sent out 1,000 people and dispatched fully armed warriors to go and help the caravan. Now what happened was, Abu Sufyan found out about what's happening, so he immediately headed west. And he headed west and he did double time. He traveled during the day and he traveled during the night, which is not normal. So he went double the pace and he was able to get away from the army. Immediately he sent another envoy back to the Quraysh again and saying the caravan is safe, don't worry about it. Now the Quraysh, when they got this other envoy, they were already on their way to Medina. And they already had 1,000 soldiers there. So what happened was, the caravan is safe, but then the Meccan army, they looked and they said, oh look, we've outnumbered the Muslim army 3-1. They've got 300, we've got 1,000. Some of them did not want to fight at all. Some of them said, no, look, we only came to protect the caravan. We did not come to fight. So let's go back. But Abu Jahl, one of the biggest enemies of Islam, he was the one who said, there's no way in the world we're going back. Now is our time to crush them. This is our opportunity that we have. So they were thinking about that. Then a man by the name of Utbah decided, who was one of the chiefs, he said that I'm going to pay the blood money for that one person who was killed. Remember, the Quraysh found a pretext to go and attack. So what happens is, when a person's killed, they're saying, oh, well, we're going to use that to go and attack Medina. But this man by the name of Utbah, he says, I'm going to pay the blood money so that we can avert this war. They reject his offer completely. They said, no, we're not going to allow you to pay that. We're still going to go to war anyways. So even though they tried to avert it, Abu Jahl and other people insisted. They said, no, we're going to war. This all took place in the month of Ramadan, the second year after the Hijrah, which is the equivalent to 624 CE. Now the battle began on the 17th of Ramadan. Okay? Before the battle actually started, there were some things that happened. Number one, the Prophet ﷺ, he asked the people, he asked the Muslims, are you guys, would you like to go out and fight? Or would we like to stay inside the city? So Abu Bakr answers, and he says, no, let's go. We're ready to fight, we're with you. Then the next person, he asks again, Umar answers. He says, yes, we're ready to go and fight. Then he asks again, another person answers. He says, yes, we're ready, we're going to go and fight. The Prophet ﷺ asked again, he said, are you guys, would you like to stay in the city or are you ready to go out and fight? And then they realized, he did not want an answer from the Muhajirin. He did not want an answer from the people who migrated from Mecca. He wanted an answer from the helpers from the Ansar who were living there. Why did he want to answer from them? Because the treaty that they agreed with in the second pledge of Aqaba said, you're going to defend the city. You're going to defend me and you're going to defend the city. But that means when I'm inside the city. That doesn't mean when you go outside the city as well. So he wanted to make sure that they were with him. So one of the leaders of the Ansar, Sa'd ibn Mu'adh, he came and he made this statement. He said, no, Messenger of Allah, if we will go with you wherever you go, we're not going to be like, the people of Musa who did not go out and fight with him. He says, if you jump in the sea, we're going to jump in the sea after you. That's how much we're ready. So he was very content, he was very pleased with the idea. So they went out. So while they went out, they traveled outside, they reached some wells. Wherever you travel, you have to go to wells, right? So they reached some wells, and one of the things that took place was that one of the companions, he asked the Prophet ﷺ, he said, the place where we stopped right now, is this a revelation from Allah, or is it your own opinion? And he said, no, this is actually my own opinion. I've decided to stop here. He said, then I have a suggestion for you. We should actually go to Badr, because the wells at Badr are the big giant wells. And that's where you need to have the water. He says, my suggestion is, we go to Badr, we surround the wells, and the army is going to be coming from far, they're going to be traveling through the desert. We stop them from actually getting the water in the well. So while we're fighting, we have the water, and while they're fighting, they have no water except the water that they carried with them. So the Prophet ﷺ accepted this man's suggestion, and they actually went and they camped at Badr. So they reached Badr and they began to guard the wells over there. Now the battle took place in the month of Ramadan. In the beginning there were 3 duels which took place, which is a very symbolic how 3 people actually fight. The people who were fighting on the Muslim side was Hamza, Ali, and Ubaidah ibn al-Harith. Hamza and Ali were able to kill the people who they were dueling with, and Ubaidah actually killed the other guy, but he got stabbed himself and he died later of the wound that he got stabbed with. So the Muslims in the end, they lost 14, and without getting into the details of what happened in Badr, the Muslims won the Battle of Badr. Summary. Quraysh lost 70, and there were 70 prisoners taken by the Muslims from the Quraysh. The Muslims lost 14 people. So the Muslims were victorious in this by the help of Allah. Now what happened afterwards? The Muslims treated the prisoners very honorably, and the aftermath, the effect of Badr was that now the Muslims had some respect for themselves, and they were respected and had some authority in Arabia. People said, this is not some random group of small people that are just going to be going away tomorrow. This is a very important people. It seems like they're here and they're here to stay. So they actually had some status and they had some position among the people in Arabia. So what happened here was the prisoners, we're going to talk about, oh subhanAllah, we skipped the prisoners. Let us talk about a few points here that are not on your slides. There was a dispute about the spoils of war. Spoils of war are the goods and the weapons and all the other things that the enemy soldiers leave behind, whether in their tents or whether on their persons, whatever they may have on themselves. These spoils are considered quite important because they're worth a lot of money. So there was a dispute about the spoils of war. And some of the companions, they started arguing. They said, you know what, whatever we picked up, we should be getting the spoils. And the other companion said, no, because you were in the front lines, you were able to pick up these spoils. But we were in the back and we were defending the rear and we didn't have the opportunity to go and collect the spoils. So this is not fair. So what happened? Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala revealed a verse in the Quran that said the spoils actually belong to Allah and His Messenger. Which means that He is going to distribute them. It's not about you that you pick up whatever you got. That was one way of doing things before. But this is a new revelation coming. It's chapter 8, first verse of the surah. The next thing, when the Muslims returned to Medina, after they were victorious, there was actually a tragedy that took place. And that was that Ruqayyah, the daughter of the Prophet, was died. She passed away. The next thing that happened was there were captives. Now the captives, what do you do with the captives that you have from the Battle of Badr? There was a difference of opinion. So Abu Bakr said that we should ransom the captives. We should ransom them, we could get a lot of money out of the Quraysh, and this money can be used to help Islam. The Prophet ﷺ agreed with the opinion of Abu Bakr. Umar's opinion was that we should kill them. Why? Because, number one, this is the custom in Arabia. This is what everybody else does anyway. This is what they would do to our captives. And number two, these people will come back and they will fight us again. Right? They're going to keep on fighting us again and again. We're not getting anything out of it. So this was his opinion. But the Prophet ﷺ went with the opinion of Abu Bakr. And the interesting thing was that the Quranic verses were revealed, which actually reproached both of them and said, this was a wrong decision that you made. You desired the life of this world. You wanted to get some money out of that. That is not the correct opinion. However, the opinion had already been taken. Even though the revelation came down, so they were ordered to continue with the guarantees that they had. So they ransomed some of the captives, and the captives that were not able, they were too poor to pay for themselves, they had to teach 10 people in Medina to read and write. If you can teach 10 people to read and write, you're automatically freed as a prisoner of war. So it shows you the importance of the emphasis of education in Islam. The next thing, the Battle of Uhud. What is the cause of the Battle of Uhud? First of all, the Quraysh want revenge for what took place. The Quraysh are very interested in revenge happening. Actually, you know what? Let's go back, since these are not on your slides, but take notes on this part, inshallah. There's two other important events that took place in between Badr and Uhud, and since we have some time, we'll go into them very quickly. The first is Bani Qaynuqa. Bani Qaynuqa is one of the Jewish tribes that was living, and they were the ones who were actually living inside of Medina. They were the only ones that were living right there directly in the city of Medina. So what happened was that there was a plot that was taking place. And the Prophet ﷺ heard about the plot, that they were going to be treacherous to their treaty that they had signed with the Muslims. So the Prophet goes and visits the Bani Qaynuqa to determine whether their relationship is intact or whether their relationship is turned a little bit sour. Because now keep in mind the circumstances here. After the Battle of Badr, now people are actually fearing the Muslims. They have some respect in front of the Muslims. So what happens now is, now that you have the Jewish tribes who actually had some power over here, their balance of power is weakened. So they're obviously going to be thinking, hey, you know what, who do these guys think they are trying to take over this territory? This is our territory. Since the beginning they've had this idea, but now it's just going to increase. Their victory of Badr is actually going to increase. It's not going to be a beneficial thing for them, in their opinion. So he goes and he visits the Bani Qaynuqa, which is the Jewish tribe that's living over there, to see whether their relationship still stands. And the answer that they give him was a very threatening answer. They said, you think that just because you won at Badr against the Quraysh, that you're something special now? So try and fight us. If you fight us, you'll see what we're really made of. So they give a very threatening answer. They didn't officially break anything. So the Prophet went back and he said, okay, these are some people who are problematic. They're causing some problems. We should be careful of them. But no action was taken. A few days later, a Muslim woman went into the Bani Qaynuqa market, where they actually have their market. And she was humiliated by one of the people. She went actually she went to a jeweler to get some jewelry made or something like that. When she sat down, one of the men tied her garment to the chair. So in such a way that when she stood up, her her private parts, her under her dress was revealed. And everyone started laughing at her, everyone started making fun of her. And this was just everyone, instead of people feeling sympathy for her, they started making fun of her, they started laughing, ha, that's a funny joke. So one of the Muslims who saw what was happening, he came and he got in a fight with the man who actually did that, who tied the thing to her chair. When they got in a fight, the Muslim man actually ended up killing the Jew. Now this was obviously a wrong thing that happened, but he killed him. Now what happened was, when they saw that the Muslim killed the Jew, a group of Jews jumped on the Muslim and they ended up killing the Muslim. So now you have one dead Jew, you have one dead Muslim. Now what should have happened at this point? According to the treaty, they're supposed to go back to the Prophet and they're supposed to tell him that, you know what, now we need to go and settle our dispute, we have to settle our quarrel, we need blood money, we need this, we need that. Instead of going back to the Prophet, instead of doing that, instead they go to Abdullah ibn Ubay. Now Abdullah ibn Ubay was known by the Muslims, or at this time suspected by the Muslims, of being a hypocrite, of being a person who's pretending to actually be a Muslim. Because he always goes and makes like a funny comment to go and insult the Prophet. Not directly, but indirectly, and you could tell that this person is not a very sincere believer. But they did not openly say anything. So they go to Abdullah ibn Ubay, who was a very influential person at that time, and they said that we want to ally with you. So they go ahead and they ally with Abdullah ibn Ubay, although that violates the terms of the contract. So this was a complete violation of the covenant, and the Prophet ﷺ, he realized that. So he sent an army to go and besiege the fortress at Bani Qaynuqa. So they surrounded the fortresses, and 2 weeks later, the Bani Qaynuqa surrendered. Now when they surrendered, they were obviously, normally, there's two things. Number one, in Arab culture and Arab custom, you're supposed to kill the warriors after they surrender completely. That's what normally happens. They're Jews though. According to the Torah, the book of Deuteronomy, you find the exact same law taking place. It says, you kill the fighting men, and you capture the women, and you capture the children. So, instead of doing this, Abdullah ibn Ubay, who's the hypocrite, the leader of the hypocrites, comes and intercedes on their behalf, and he goes to the Prophet and he tells them, give them mercy. They have been my allies for a long time, and please give them mercy, please go easy on them. So what he decides is, he decides to spare their lives. He says, we're going to take your belongings, and you're going to be exiled from here, and your lives are spared, but your belongings have to stay. And they went to live with other Jewish tribes because of their treachery. Now we're going to see them coming back. Their story is not done. They've gone to live with other Jewish tribes, like for example in Khaybar, other Jewish tribes in the surrounding areas. So we're going to see their return. The next incident that takes place is a delegation that comes to visit from Najran. Now Najran is a place in Yemen. And keep in mind that Yemen, originally in the past, there was a Jewish empire in Yemen. Afterwards, when we talked about the elephant incident, we know that Christianity had actually come to reign in Yemen. Remember that they were making the giant church and the whole elephant incident that took place? So there's Christians in Yemen. Now 14 Christian leaders, they came from Najran to Medina. Now these Christians, they were most probably of a group called the Melkite Orthodox type of Christians. There's many different sects and different groups of Christians, even in the past. So they were most probably Orthodox from the Melkite sect. When they came to visit the Prophet, they just wanted to see what's going on, who's this new person. And the Prophet ﷺ recited to them verse 64 of Surah Al-Imran. It says, O people of the book, come to a common word between you and us, that we do not worship other gods, and we only worship God, we leave aside all of these things. Now look at this verse very carefully. This verse oftentimes is misquoted. This verse is calling that you come to a common word, meaning a common word that we should leave aside all other deities. We should only worship God. We should not worship anyone else, only worship Allah. And at the same time, it actually criticizes the cult, or it criticizes the organization where people put their priests ahead of their religion. Meaning their priests determine what's going to be in terms of, what their religion is going to be. So this is a very important thing. This is the way that he called them to Islam. Now these leaders, they refused. They said, no, we're not interested in Islam. We don't want to accept Islam. So he invited them, but they did not accept. 14 Christian leaders. Now, they actually came to the masjid and they said, we would like to pray inside your mosque. And the companions are thinking, yeah, right. You're not getting in that thing, no way. And the Prophet ﷺ gave them permission to actually pray inside the masjid. And they faced in the eastern direction towards Jerusalem, and they prayed. When they were done praying and they saw that the kindness that the Prophet, peace be upon him, had given them, they asked him, they said, I want you to send an envoy, send somebody with us who can teach us a little bit more about Islam, and then we'll think about it. We're not going to do anything right now, but send one guy with us, and on our way he can teach us some things and we'll think about it. Now Umar was there, and we know the story of Umar, and Umar was kind of, hinting, I want to be the guy. He couldn't directly say it, but he's kind of like going around and saying, we really should send somebody, trying to hint like, hey, it should be me. But since he didn't openly speak up, Abu Ubaidah ibn al-Jarrah was actually the person who was sent with them to go and teach them their religion. So the point here is that they came, they were offered Islam, they rejected, and they went back home unharmed. That is very contradictory to the lie that's always spread about Islam was spread by the sword. If you don't convert, then you're going to die. Very clearly contradictory. Now let's skip to Uhud. The Battle of Uhud in the 3rd year after Hijrah. Now the Quraysh, they wanted revenge. The Quraysh wanted revenge for Badr. So what happened was a surprise attack actually took place. Meaning that the Muslims did not know that the battle of, the army from Uhud is actually going to be coming. So the Quraysh, they muster up 3,000 people. They get 3,000 people, and you have the Prophet's uncle, Abbas, sending a letter to the Prophet from Mecca, telling them that there's an army of 3,000 on its way. And when he got the letter, he had 1 week to prepare. You have to prepare immediately. Now this is very interesting. Let us look at Abbas a little bit. Abbas was the uncle of the Prophet. He had not accepted Islam. Not only had he not accepted Islam, but at the same time, during the battle, during the pledge of Aqaba, he was negotiating and bargaining and telling the people of Yathrib, don't take him unless you're going to protect him. Otherwise we'll keep him here. At the same time, Abbas was one of those who participated in the Battle of Badr. And he was taken a captive. And he was ransomed. Can you imagine? Now, despite the fact that he's still not a Muslim, he's in Mecca and he's sending the Prophet, he's sending his nephew a letter telling them an army is on its way. So this is the mentality that was there. He was kind of pushed to go into Badr. He didn't really want to, but the fact that he did and he was captured is interesting. So, the Prophet ﷺ wanted to defend Medina and stay inside the city of Medina. He decided that I want to stay in Medina and we should let them attack us and we have a better defensive strategy. Now, few people were in favor of this idea. Abdullah ibn Ubay, the leader of the hypocrites, he was also in favor of this idea. He said, yeah, let's stay in Medina. He probably had some ideas in the back of his mind, whatever he had. But the people who were pushing and saying, no, we should go out and fight them, were the ones who did not participate in the Battle of Badr. So the people who did not have the honor of participating in the Battle of Badr for one reason or another, because keep in mind, the Prophet only sent out with 300 men because they were going to intercept the caravan. So he did not take every single fighter that they had. There was a lot more people who stayed behind. So those people who were not able to participate, they were saying that, you know what, we want to go out. Let's, we missed last time, we're ready to go out. So they started pressuring the Prophet, so we should go out. So the Prophet decided, okay, fine. Because of your pressure, we're going to go ahead, we'll go out. Then later on, when everyone was getting ready, they were preparing for battle, they realized that, we actually offended the Prophet. Because he was telling us that he wanted to stay inside Medina, and we pressured him to go outside. So they felt very sad. So they went back to the Prophet and they said, we're very sorry, we kind of lost ourselves. We just wanted that honor of going out. So, we're really sorry, if you would like to stay, then we'll stay. So even though the Prophet did want to stay, he said, look, it's not right that once you put on your armor and once you prepare your army and you're just about to leave, you don't change your mind and then stay back. Because this is considered dishonorable. Once your armor is on, everything's ready, you don't just change your mind and then stay. So this was the decision. He decided to go with their opinion, even though he himself was not interested. He did not want to go out himself. Interesting lesson is that this was not direct revelation. Revelation was not sent about each and every single little point. And you find that even the Prophet was giving up his own opinion for the position of sometimes the majority or sometimes the people who were really insisting on doing another thing. So he did not always get his way. Not like a dictator who says, whatever I say, that's what's going to be. And he's the Prophet. So this was his character. This was his characteristic. So they went out and they marched out with the army of 1,000. Okay? They marched out with the army of 1,000 men, including Abdullah ibn Ubay, who had his own people. They had 300 people. While they're marching on their way, Abdullah ibn Ubay likes to reveal himself to really be a hypocrite a little bit more. And he says, you know what? You didn't accept my opinion. My opinion was that we should have stayed in Medina. I'm leaving. So while they were marching to Uhud, the mountain of Uhud, he said, you didn't like my opinion? I'm taking my men and we're all going back. And these were all hypocrite men, because he was the leader of the hypocrites. They were all hypocrites. You can tell now that they're hypocrites. They left the army of the Prophet, they went back. Now how many people does the army have left? 700 people, because the hypocrites have left. Now when they reached the mountain of Uhud, the Prophet ﷺ analyzed the terrain. He looked around the area, because he's a strategist as well. He's not, fool. So he looks at the area, alright? He says, he saw that there's a mountain pass, and there's like a field here, there's some mountains here, there's Mount Uhud here, and there's a pass here. That's where the fighting would most probably take place. But there was a way to go around, there was a small pass around the mountain, around the back. And he said that if we don't guard that pass can be exploited. So he put 50 archers on the mountain. And those 50 archers were ordered, they had one Amir, one leader, and they said, you're not supposed to move no matter what happens, you hold your ground and you have to guard this mountain pass. So the 50 archers were there. Let's see what else. Okay, so 50 archers are there, set up, the battle begins. So while the battle begins, the Muslims were initially winning. The Muslims were initially winning, they were initially being victorious, and they were victorious to such an extent that the Quraysh, they started retreating. Now while the Quraysh started retreating, we saw what happened in the Battle of Badr. There were some people thinking spoils of war, and all of that. So the archers, they saw that, look, they actually thought, hey, the war's over, it's done, it's finished. So let's go and get down the mountain quickly, and let's collect some spoils. Let's get some of the money that's left over, otherwise we're not going to get anything for ourselves. So they ran down the mountain, except a few of them. Their leader told them, don't go down the mountain, but they went down anyway. So the vast majority of them went down. When they went down, a man by the name of Khalid ibn al-Walid, who was actually in charge of the cavalry, the horsemen in the Qurayshi army, he noticed that point immediately. Very master planner. He saw that immediately the archers are down. He did exactly what they expected him to do. He went around the mountain pass with his horses, and now they were able to attack from the rear. So what happened is, they attacked them from the rear, and when you're fighting in the front and someone comes from behind you, it's a surprise attack, you didn't realize that it's coming. Now when you turn around, when the Quraysh on the other side who were retreating saw that, they turned around and they launched a counterattack. Now you have the Muslims squeezed between both sides. And this is where things got very difficult for the Muslims. So their victory, which was about to be a victory, actually changed completely. So this pass was exploited. Because of this tension and this confusion that was taking place, the Prophet ﷺ himself was attacked. And he fell off of his horse, he fell down to the ground. One of his teeth were actually broken. The chain mail that he was wearing armor, the chain mail actually went and he was hit and it went into his cheek. It went into his cheek so badly that the person who later he was pulling it out with his teeth, he lost 2 of his front teeth just trying to pull it out. That's how far it had gone into his face. So there was a rumor that was spread. After seeing the Prophet ﷺ fall down on the floor, a rumor was spread that the Prophet had been killed. So some of the companions, they just put down their weapons. They said, what's the point? What's the point of even fighting anymore? If the Prophet's killed, then everything's over. But then somebody made an announcement and they said, no, the Prophet's alive, he's right over here. Now when somebody announces the Prophet's right over here, you have 2 things happen. 1, all the companions rush over there to go and protect him. But 2, all of the Quraysh rush over there to go and kill him. So what happens here? You have the most heroic feats taking place at this time. Some of the companions surround the Prophet ﷺ like human shields. And they are taking arrows in their bodies. They're being stabbed. The people who were dead later on, they looked at their bodies. They said they had 70 to 100 wounds on their body just by trying to protect the Prophet. Imagine everyone shooting arrows in this direction. What can the companions do? The only thing they can do is stand right in his way. in order to give their own life for the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam. This is what took place at this point in time. The Muslims then retreated. They were able to retreat and they went back up the mountain and they were able to minimize their losses. But this was a defeat. What was the outcome? You have 70 Muslims were killed. And they were not only killed, but their dead bodies were mutilated afterwards. The Makkans lost 22. And now what happened was very interesting. Besides, we'll skip certain small details. What happened after this was that the Muslims retreated and they went back to Medina. As soon as they went back to Medina, the Prophet ﷺ immediately got a group of people and he set out for an expedition. Now this was his characteristic. You're gonna learn this. This was what he always did. He never made it clear what he's doing and where he's going, so that no one can find out what's taking place. So immediately, imagine the Muslims are all wounded, they're messed up, they just lost the war. Immediately, as soon as they got back to Medina, immediately they regrouped, got their people together, and they set out with another army. And now Abdullah ibn Ubay comes along and says, hey, I'm with you guys, let's go. I'm in, my 300 soldiers are in. He said, no. Nobody who stayed behind is going to come out with us. Imagine, they just got defeated by an army of 3,000. Now they're going to go back out against them again. And he's saying, no, we don't need your 300 people. Everyone who came out is going out again. It doesn't matter whether you're wounded, doesn't matter whether your arm is messed up or your arm got chopped off or whatever, you're coming anyways. So they went out, and as soon as they went out, they camped in a place which was not too far from the Quraysh. And he told each and every single soldier that they had, every single one of you will light 10 fires. Every single one will light 10 fires. Now how do you determine that there's 3,000 people in an army? They didn't used to count in every single one. They didn't have computers. They didn't have databases. They didn't have rosters where they're counting how many people exactly they have. Everything was estimated. And how do you estimate? You estimate by the number of fires that you see, by the number of tents that you see. So by lighting 10 fires per soldier, it looked like they had this huge army all across. And all of a sudden, some people who were passing by, they sent some people to go give them false information. Some non-Muslims gave them false information. Oh, the Muslims have regrouped. They've amassed this huge army and they're coming to just slaughter you. So they got really, and they didn't really have that. So they got really scared and they took their forces and they went back. They went back to Mecca. And alhamdulillah, this was a blessing from Allah. So they got scared and they left. Now, the next thing that took place was the Jewish expulsion. We'll talk about a few things. First of all, let us look at these. I'll give you this. You have the slides in front of you. I have some more notes here. First of all, what's called the expedition of Banu Nadir. Now, Banu Nadir was another one of the Arab tribes. Okay, this happened in the year 4, the 4th year after the Hijrah, after the migration. Okay, what happened was, keep in mind the cause. It's very important. A tribe by the name of Banu Amir. Okay, Banu Amir, they requested the Muslims, just like the people of Najran, we would like you to send some people to teach us what Islam is, so we can consider it. So they said, we would like you to send some people. So the Prophet sent 40 Muslims to go and teach them about Islam. While they were going to teach them, on their way, before they even reached the place, they were intercepted by a group of people who were actually from the Banu Amir, but they were not the real leaders of the tribe. And all of them were slaughtered. All 40 Muslims who were going to preach Islam, very, very knowledgeable people. He chose the best ones who knew how to make, who knew how to call others. They were slaughtered in a place called Bir Ma'una, which is a well. Now what happened is that while they were killed, actually they sent out 40, one of them survived. Only one man survived and he was able to escape. While he was escaping, he was on his way back to Medina to tell the Prophet what happened, that everyone got slaughtered. While he was on his way back, he saw some other people from the Banu Amir, who were actually not among the guilty party. And he saw them, and he thought that they were the ones who had actually killed him as well. So what did he do? He went and he killed those 2 people. He killed those 2 people even though they were innocent. Now the interesting thing is, how did this guy not get killed, right? 2 people didn't get killed initially. Why did all 40 get killed? How did this guy escape? Interesting little point. is that both of them were actually going to fetch water for the Muslims. And since they were away from the camp, the rest of them got killed. The ones who were going to do getting the water, they were not killed. Small lesson learned is that, you know what, if you like to volunteer for good causes, it might just be your victory. So keep volunteering, inshallah. Keep working, inshallah. But this guy killed 2 people from the tribe of Banu Amr, right? And they were actually innocent, but he thought that they were guilty. So this is called killing by mistake. The guy, when you kill by mistake, you have to pay blood money. So what happened was, since the Banu Amr were not actually responsible, they were not the ones who killed, the Muslims have to pay blood money. Okay? So now the Muslims, the Prophet says, okay, we're willing to pay the blood money for these 2 people. Blood money is 100 camels per person. That's 200 camels. That's a lot of money actually. 200 camels is considered a lot. So what does he do? He goes to the tribe of Banu Nadir. Now Banu Nadir is a Jewish tribe. Keep in mind, what was the agreement that they signed? The agreement that they signed is, anyone you make an ally, we're an ally. Anyone comes and attacks you, they're attacking us. They attack us, they're attacking you. We all defend each other, and we're all allies. So what happens is, in this culture, that when you have an ally, you also split the cost of the blood money. So what does he do? He goes and he asks this tribe of Banu Nadir to split the cost. You pay 100 camels, we pay 100 camels, because somebody was killed. Now, he went to go visit the chief of Banu Nadir. His name was Huyay. When he went to go visit him, what happened was that Jibreel, the angel, revealed to the Prophet that they were actually trying to kill him. There was a plot to actually kill him when he went to go visit the Banu Nadir. Immediately he got up secretly and he left. He went back to Medina. His companions that went with him, they're still sitting there. They say, where'd the Prophet go? He's gone. They realized he's gone. Something happened. So they left as well. So they went back to Medina, and then he didn't tell anybody else, because he knew that something would happen. So when they found out later on that this was a revelation from Jibreel telling them that a plot was going to take place, they were actually trying to murder him. So because of this, and because of their treachery, and because that they were not going to pay and all of these things, the Prophet ﷺ gave them a warning. Said, you have 10 days to leave. Because of all the things that you've been doing, you have 10 days to leave. Now what did they do instead? This was a threat. He said, you got to go now. You're being exiled. You saw what happened to Bani Qaynuqa. You're being exiled now. Go somewhere else. You should not be here anymore. So he said, you have 10 days. Instead of leaving, instead of doing anything else, who did they team up with? They team up with Abdullah ibn Ubay, the leader of the hypocrites again. Because keep in mind, before the Muslims had come to Yathrib, Abdullah ibn Ubay was like the leader of, or about to become the leader of all these people. He had many alliances in the past. So he said, oh, well, they're a close friend of his. So Abdullah ibn Ubay promised, hey, I got your back, don't worry, I'm going to be there. So he teamed up with them. He said, don't worry, we're going to take care of you, let's fight them. Let's put an end to the Muslims. So they said, okay, fine. They declared war. They said, okay, we're going to team up with Abdullah, and we're going to go and fight the Muslims. So the Prophet ﷺ sets out, and he besieges their fortresses as well. They have fortresses, keep in mind. In Medina, there's no fortresses. But the Jews, they were a little bit more sophisticated in technology than the Arabs. They used to build fortresses so that they can be inside and they can, withstand there. The siege lasted for 10 days. At the end of 10 days, they still did not surrender. What did they do at the end of 10 days? The Muslims decided that, we don't want to prolong this any longer. They cut down the tallest palm trees that were in this tribe, that were in this area of the Banu Nadir. This is the only time that they've ever cut down palm trees. And this verse is actually revealed in the Quran regarding the palm trees, that it was by the will of Allah that you cut down the palm trees. Now why did they cut the palm trees? Because palm trees were the most important possession that the Banu Nadir had, the most important commodity, assets that they have. When they saw that their trees are falling, they said that, the Muslims are going to go and destroy everything else. We have nothing. If we keep staying in here, there's nothing left of our city. So eventually, they surrendered. After they surrendered, Huyay, the same guy who was plotting to kill the Prophet, he comes and he negotiates with the Prophet. Now keep in mind, this is you're not supposed to negotiate actually. The same Jewish law would have the men killed, women and children taken as captive, everything else taken as captive. So Huyay goes to the Prophet and he negotiates and he says, we need some mercy. We're surrendering and this and that. Keep in mind, they didn't just leave within 10 days. They actually declared war. So he could have done anything. He could have killed the men. He could have taken them as ransom. He could have done whatever he wanted. What does he do because of the negotiations? This time, he allows them to leave with their lives and with their possessions. So he doesn't keep their possessions and he doesn't kill anybody else. And where do they go to? They go to a fortress named Khaybar, which is a little bit further up north. And we're going to talk about Khaybar later on. So they a lot of the people from Banu Qaynuqa, they also went to other tribes and some of them went to Khaybar as well. So now the Jews are being kicked out of here, but they're regrouping. They're still allowed to live in a Jewish city. It's not like they're, being expelled from the peninsula or something like that. So this is what happened in terms of the Jewish expulsion. Nadir, we talked about. Qaynuqa is there as well. Okay, the Battle of the Trench. Okay, the Battle of the Trench is known as the Ghazwat al-Ahzab. Ahzab means the allies, and the trench is Khandaq. So sometimes it's called the Battle of Khandaq, sometimes it's called the Battle of the allies, the Ahzab who got together. Okay, Battle of the Trench. Alright, let me focus on this. Okay, so in the 5th year after Hijrah, the 5th year after the migration, the Quraysh start preparing for an attack against Medina. So who is one of the people to go and help them? Huyay, the one who had just been kicked out. He goes, the chief of the Banu Nadir, goes to Mecca and starts instigating them. Hey, look, they kicked us out. Go and attack them. But this is what you get for sparing their lives, right? So they go to Mecca and he starts instigating a plot. The Quraysh always wanted to attack anyways. Now they have some more support. So they say, we'll support you as well. We got your back, don't worry, we'll handle it. So Huyay goes, they make an alliance. The Jewish tribe of Nadir, who has been kicked out now, they're in Khaybar right now, and they make an alliance with the Quraysh of Makkah. Then they start allying with other tribes who also don't like the Muslims. And they ally with people in the east, which is a place known as Najd, which is modern day Riyadh, that area. Now what happens is, they ally with a few tribes, Banu Asad, Banu Ghadfan, Banu Sulaim, you don't need to know the names. The Quraysh are able to get 4,000 people, 4,000 soldiers. But Najd is a very strong place as well. All the tribes allied together, they get 6,000. So now you have an army of 10,000 people. Now just look at the numbers of what they were and look at the numbers of what they're getting to. This is a huge army of 10,000 people. Okay? Again, what happens? Abbas is still in Mecca. Sends another letter over there and saying, you know what? There's an army of 10,000 coming your way right now. How long do they have to prepare? A week again. So they have 1 week to prepare for an army of 10,000. Now the Muslims obviously have more, because people have been entering into Islam, they've been entering into alliances. The Muslims now have 3,000 soldiers. But 3,000 soldiers versus 10,000 is still a difficult thing. So they have 1 week to prepare. What does the Prophet do? Like usual, like he did in Badr, he asked for people's advice. Like he did in Uhud, he asked for advice. So again he asked for advice. And Salman, who was from Persia, his name is Salman al-Farisi, Salman the Persian. He's one of the companions. He says, well, in Persia, we have a tactic that if someone's coming to attack us, we dig a trench around the front, actually. No one does it around the entire city. But they said we dig a trench so that they're not able to cross the trench with their horses. They can only shoot us with arrows and they have to get their men in the trench. So the horse can't jump the trench. So your horsemen are out. And they're very, very important. And if the soldiers try and jump in the trench and then climb back up, you can just shoot them right there with your arrows. So that's not going to work either. So it's a very good protection, defensive strategy. The Prophet accepts it. He accepts the wisdom that a foreign nation, which is not at all, nice to Islam, that a foreign nation was actually using. So everybody worked to dig this trench immediately. There's no time to waste. The Prophet, peace be upon him, is digging the trench along with the rest of the Muslims himself. They were able to dig a trench around most of Medina. The rest of Medina was actually surrounded by hills and mountains. So you don't have that problem. You can't get over the mountain, the rest of it is a trench. So Medina is protected, is defended. Now what takes place here? The armies arrive. The army of the Quraysh arrives from the north, and the army of Najd arrives from the east. So you have the north covered, you have the east covered. What happens? The armies go and surround the entire city. 10,000 soldiers surrounding the entire city of Medina. And then they see this trench in the front. And they're like, there's a trench. We've never seen anything like this before. What are we going to do? So they're thinking, what are we going to do? What are we going to do? So what they do is their strategy. They're also not fools. So the strategy was, they said most of the trench, the open part is in the south. And the hills, the mountain passes, are actually in the north. So they took the vast majority of their army and they sent it up north to go and attack from the mountains, which is very difficult. But their tactic was, then all of the defense of the Muslims has to move up north to the city of Medina. That will leave the trench unprotected and we can jump over the trench. This was their strategy. And their strategy was almost about to work actually. So what happened was, they did that. But guess who lives in the bottom? We're going to see. Okay, we're going to see. There's a tribe by the name of Bani Qurayza. Okay, Bani Qurayza is another Jewish tribe that lives right around Medina. They were in the south, right where the trench was, right? But they were allied with the Muslims still. They had not broken their alliance yet with the Muslims. So what took place? You have the armies in the north attacking the Muslims inside the city, and now the south is actually left unprotected. What happens is that, who was the person who bargained it? I don't recall, but one of the people, one of the Quraysh chiefs, or one of the Jewish chiefs goes to the Banu Qurayza, and they negotiate and they say, why don't you betray your treaty with the Muslims? Why don't you just cancel the treaty and, let us, join the allies, and, we can cross over this trench and we can go and, get the Muslims out of the way. So in the beginning they were a little bit hesitant, but later on their chief decided, okay, we're going to break the covenant with the Muslims. So what does the Prophet do? The Prophet hears about this news, he wants to go and check. He wants to double check whether it's true or not. So he told his envoy, go over there, find out whether the Banu Qurayza have really defected from us and joined the allies, or whether they're still with us. And he said, if they're still with us, make a public announcement so that everyone's, all the Muslims realize, hey, everything's okay. If they've actually broken the treaty, don't say anything. Don't make any comment. Because the Muslims are just going to get more scared. So when he went back, he informed the Prophet that actually, yes, they've broken the truce. They've broken the treaty with the Muslims. So now they've lost the south. They've lost the trench is about to be exploited. He sends 300 men led by Zayd to go in the south to protect the trench. Some of the Quraysh actually jumped over the trench and were actually able to make it inside the city, but the Muslims were able to fight those people off. So without getting into the details of what took place, the Prophet is in a dire situation right now. They're being surrounded from all sides with an army of 10,000. So the Prophet goes and he tries to get some other tribes to defect and quit the allies and join the Muslims. So he goes to two of the clans within the tribe of Ghatfan, very powerful tribe. And he says, look, if you join us and you you quit them, you join us, we'll give you 1/3 of all of the dates that Medina produces. We'll basically buy you out. Here, you get this date crop, you join us, and you leave the allies. So the Ghatfan they said, okay, fine. They tried to bargain him to 50%, but he said no. They accepted 1/3. He can bargain too, alhamdulillah. So they accepted 1/3. Then he asked the Aus and the Khazraj, meaning he asked the people of Medina, the Ansar. He says, you know what, we've negotiated this treaty. Technically, this is mostly your land. So do you give us permission to go ahead and do this? And are these people reliable? Will they actually follow through? Will they actually be able to help us? The Ansar decide no. First of all, the people are not reliable. And second of all, we don't need them. We can handle things on our own, so that's cancelled. They decide they don't need the help. They don't need their help, and they don't even get the help from these tribes. Now, 3 very important things which actually led to the conclusion of this conflict, which is important to know. Number 1, a man by the name of Nu'aym ibn Mas'ud was a very, very important elder man, well respected from the Quraysh. He's well respected all over Arabia. He secretly became a Muslim. And when he secretly became a Muslim, he did not tell anybody, but he is very well respected. He went to the Prophet and he told him, look, I'm a secret Muslim. Tell me what you would like me to do. How can I help you? And he said, okay, I want you to go and sow the seeds of discord between the allies. Go and get them to somehow argue with each other. Go and get them to somehow fight with each other. So he asked the Prophet, he says, am I allowed to lie? And the Prophet said, yes. War is deception. Do whatever you can to get them away from us. This is in a state of war. In a state of war, things are different. So what does he do? Very, very brilliant man. He goes to Banu Qurayza, the Jewish tribe that actually allied with the Quraysh. He goes to Banu Qurayza and he tells them, he says, do you really trust the Quraysh? Do you think that if something happens, somehow if the Muslims start winning and you start losing, you think the Quraysh are really going to get your back? They said, well, we hope so. So why don't you think? Be safe. You need to be smart. So he said, well, what do you think we should do? He said, ask the Quraysh to send some of their men to you as collateral. So that in case anything happens, in case the Muslims are able to defeat us or something, we know for a fact the Quraysh has to help us because we have some of their men. We have them as collateral. So they said, that's a good idea. Yeah, we're going to do that. So they send the envoy to Quraysh. Before the envoy gets there, he immediately goes up to the Quraysh camp. And he says, you trust these Banu Qurayza? You trust them? You know what they're doing? They actually want to go back and they want to join with the Muslims again. They want to join with Muhammad again. And he said, no, come on. He said, I'm telling you, this is the word on the street. And you know what they're going to do? They want you to go and send them some people from your tribe and from the Quraysh. And when they get them, they're going to take them as prisoners. They're going to hand them over to the Muslims to show that the Muslims, hey, we're with you. Look, we captured some of the Quraysh. So they go, what? Abu Sufyan, the leader of the Quraysh, is like, what? And then when the envoy arrives, he says, hey, you know what? The Banu Quraysh are demanding that you send some of their men as collateral. Oh, that's it, man. So then all of a sudden he was able to sow the seeds of discord. All the people started fighting amongst each other. They lost trust in each other. Now this was taking a very long time. Because of the trench, number one, the thing was taking a very long time. Food was running out. It was a very harsh, cold winter, and Allah sends a very strong, fierce, bitter wind at that time. Freezing wind. It was uprooting their tents. And they've been sitting there for, almost a month. They're sitting outside. They decide finally, after all of these factors that are taking place, they said, forget this, man. We lost our allies. These guys are against us. We're losing our food. There's a freezing cold wind. So the Quraysh decide to get up and they go back home. They said, forget this, we're leaving. When they left, all the other tribes started leaving. They said, okay, we're out of here as well. So this was a huge victory for the Muslims. It was not only a physical thing, it was a very symbolic defeat for the Quraysh and for their allies. So this is the summary of basically what happened. Alright? In total, less than a dozen people were killed. And keep in mind, this is 10,000 army, right? Less than a dozen people were actually killed in this entire ordeal. Okay? So now what takes place next? Now you have Bani Qurayza. Now Bani Qurayza, keep in mind, what did they do? They sold out the Muslims. They gave up their treaty. They went and they allowed the southern part of Medina to be accessible. So Jibreel, as soon as the Muslims went back home, the Prophet ﷺ goes in his house, rests for a little bit. The next day, immediately, Jibreel gives them a revelation. You need to go immediately to Banu Qurayza and deal with them. This is not going to be taken lightly. I mean, they sold you out. You were almost killed. This would have been the end of Islam completely. So they go to Bani Qurayza with 3,000 soldiers. And they besiege their fortress for 25 days. And they finally surrendered after 25 days. So a very long time as well. Almost a month they had to surround their fortress. The men, 700 men from the Banu Qurayza were tied up. Now it's very important to understand their fate. Because this is used by a lot of enemies of Islam. They try to exploit this and say, oh, look what they did here and there. Now you see most of the picture. You've seen how he's been dealing with hostages, how he's been dealing with, with prisoners of war and all of these things. So now look what happens. 700 men are tied up and they're deciding what should we do with them. So the tribe of Aus, which are among the Ansar, the group of the Ansar, they used to be allied with the Bani Qurayza. So they had some feelings as well. And the Banu Qurayza said, come on man, you guys were our allies for so many years, have some mercy on us as well. So they also requested mercy. Everyone requests mercy, right? So they requested mercy as well. So what the Prophet does is he says, look, if I choose one of the leaders from Aus who used to be your previous ally, if I choose one of your leaders to make a decision for you, will you be happy and will you accept the decision that that leader makes? And they say yes. Because they thought, hey, our ally would never sell us out. I mean, we are very close to these people. And they were. The Aus tribe was very, very close to these people. So they said that, they'll obviously be easy on us and everything. So they all said, yes, we will accept. Whoever is from that tribe, not anybody else, as long as it's from the Aus tribe who used to be our ally and he's one of the leaders, we will accept whatever judgment he gives. So the Prophet ¡ﷺ appoints Sa'd ibn Mu'adh, who was one of the leaders of the Aus, one of the main leaders. He appoints him and he says, okay, why don't you make the decision? Now Sa'd ibn Mu'adh is looking at them. Of course they were former allies, but he sees them and he sees that many of them were exiles from the Banu Nadir. Many of them were exiles from the Bani Qaynuqa. So they said, these are the same guys we just left out. What did they do? They go against us, they fight against us again. So Sa'd decides that the men should be executed. All the fighting men who were fighting, they should be executed. And the women and the children should be taken as captives. Now like I said before, what was the Arab custom at that time? This is exactly what people did in Arabia. It was only the Prophet that would give clemency, give leniency. Now here's the other interesting thing. Like I said before, in the Torah, the exact same law. The verse is in Deuteronomy chapter 20, verse 13 and 14. It says, when you go and you get victory in a place, you kill the men, and you capture the women, and you capture the children. This is what you do. So this is exactly in accordance with their Torah as well. Now the interesting thing here is, number one, it was Sa'd ibn Mu'adh making the decision of what's going to happen. And they accepted before. Whatever he decides, we're going to accept. Number two, interesting point is, there had never been in the history of the Prophet afterwards, there was never a treachery again. This was the last treachery that ever happened. See how many treachery, these guys broke the covenant, these guys broke the... This was the last time that someone would go and be treacherous with the Prophet. So it set a very important example for him as well. So that's Qurayza. Where's Hudaybiyah? Okay, so let's move on. Now we're talking about the truce of Hudaybiyah. Now the Prophet ﷺ, now imagine, I want you to just put yourself in this context. Look at what's happening, right? Muslims are persecuted, went to Medina, war, being attacked, having to deal with this guy breaks out of the treaty, this guy breaks out of the treaty. Imagine all of this happening. They just survived a giant attack by an army of 10,000 people. Right? Just think about where we are right now. 10,000 people almost took over the entire city of Medina. Now what happens? The Prophet ﷺ has a dream that he is entering Mecca with his head shaved, which means that he's going on a pilgrimage. So immediately, because the dreams of the prophets are true, he takes this dream to mean that we are supposed to go and perform the pilgrimage. Now this is not the pilgrimage season just yet. So he's going to perform the lesser pilgrimage. The minor pilgrimage was known as the Umrah. So immediately he leaves with over 1,000 of his companions, unarmed. Imagine this, unarmed, right? To go and visit Mecca. Now did they have some weapons? Of course they had weapons. When I say unarmed, meaning unarmed for war. They have arms to go for hunting. They have some bows. They have some swords to do all of the other things that they need to do. But they leave to go to Mecca without preparing. No armor, not prepared for war after all of the things that are happening. But what month do they leave in? They leave in the month of Dhul Qa'dah. Now this is one of the 4 sacred months. Remember we talked about 4 sacred months where you're not allowed to kill. So in these sacred months, they go and they leave and they say, you know what, inshallah, by the will of Allah, we'll be able to go and make our pilgrimage and we will not be harmed. Because he saw the dream and the dream is real. So imagine this, only 1,000, about 1,200 to 1,400 Muslims leave after all of the things that are happening and they go virtually unarmed to Mecca to go make a pilgrimage. Now technically it's their right. Right? So what happens is, the Quraysh, they send Khalid ibn al-Walid with a few hundred of his horsemen who are ready, armor, everything ready to kill. They send them out to go and intercept the Muslims. So what does the Prophet do? He goes around Khalid and he's able to go around the corner and he reaches Mecca. So he's able to escape that, whatever confrontation was about to take place. When you're in the city of Mecca, things are different. Now when he reaches a place, the plains of Hudaybiyah, Hudaybiyah is right outside of Mecca, very close to Mecca. Before he enters the city, he sends some people over there and he says, I would like to negotiate I would like to, allow the Muslims to go and enter and perform their pilgrimage. So he's negotiating now before he entered. Remember, this is not the first time that he did it. When he returned from Ta'if, before he entered Mecca again, he had to get the protection from somebody. So the same thing is happening, exactly. He's going and saying, give us protection, make sure we're allowed to go inside, no one's going to be harming us, even though it's the sacred months. So the Quraysh decide, okay, we're going to send somebody to go and make some negotiations. They send the first person to go and negotiate some treaty with the Muslims, depending on what happens, right? The first person negotiates, they come to a conclusion, they go back to the Quraysh say, no, we're not going to accept this. They send the second guy. Same thing happens, they come back, say, okay, we made an agreement. No, we're not going to accept this, forget this. Third guy goes, rejected. Fourth guy goes, rejected. So imagine 4 negotiators, all of them rejected by Quraysh. Say, no, we're not reaching any conclusion. So what does the Prophet ﷺ do? He sends Uthman into Mecca to make a negotiation. Now Uthman has a lot of clan connections. Somebody who's very well connected over there. So he sends Uthman inside of Mecca. When Uthman gets inside of Mecca, he starts making negotiations and say, look, let us perform the Umrah. And they said, oh, you're Uthman. You can perform the Umrah. Go ahead. But the Muslims, no. You can do it, but not the Muslims. Uthman said, I'm not going to do it by myself. No, I will not do it. And he stayed there for a few days. Then a rumor came back to the Muslims that Uthman had been killed. That somebody killed Uthman. So immediately when they heard this, when you kill the messenger, that's a declaration of war. Now you're not even prepared for war. You don't even have, you have like 1,000 people and you're not even fully prepared. So what does the Prophet ﷺ do? He gets all the people together, and while he's sitting under an acacia tree, he gets all of them to pledge one by one their allegiance, that they will fight till the death. Because basically when you're pledging this and you're going to fight against an army and you have no weapons and you're far away from home, you're basically signing up to die, basically. You're signing up to become a martyr and you're going to be killed over here. So they signed up and every single person took the pledge. And then the Prophet ﷺ put his hand in his other hand and he said, and this is for Uthman. Uthman is making this pledge as well, although they thought that Uthman was dead. So they were all ready. They were all ready to sacrifice their entire lives. They said, we're ready to put whatever we have on the line. This is something about honor here. We have to do something here. So they went and they made this pledge. This is called Bay'at Ridwan. This is the name of the pledge, Bay'at Ridwan. What happened was, as soon as they finished the pledge, Uthman comes back. Hey guys, I'm okay. So they realized that, hey, Uthman is here, this was just a rumor. So now they say, okay, let's continue with negotiations. Finally, they send a real negotiator, Suhail ibn Amr. Now Suhail is a master negotiator. This is a very, very brilliant man, very intelligent. He's going to later on accept Islam. You'll see that the Prophet puts him immediately in a position of authority. That's how smart this guy is. Very clever, tricky but clever at the same time. So he goes and he starts debating. He starts making a contract with the Prophet ﷺ. They start debating, they start talking about, what we should go here, whether we should do this, whether we should do that. Finally, him and the Prophet, they come to a conclusion. This is going to be our treaty. So the Prophet calls Ali. And he says, Ali, write this contract. Because the Prophet ﷺ was not literate. He himself could not read, right? So Ali starts writing. And he says, write, Bismillah ar-Rahman ar-Rahim. Let's begin the contract. And so he goes, whoa. What is this? Who is Ar-Rahman? We don't know this term, Ar-Rahman. We know Allah, but we don't know Ar-Rahman. You can't use this term on us. We're not going to accept this. Right? Bismikallahumma. And all the companions are looking. How can you erase this? How can you get rid of Bismillah ar-Rahman ar-Rahim? And the Prophet said, give it to them. Write Bismikallahumma. He said, okay, fine. And then he starts writing. He said, now write. This is a contract between Suhail ibn Amr and Muhammad, the Messenger of Allah, Muhammad Rasulullah. So Ali starts writing and Suhail goes, whoa, what do you think? Muhammad Rasulullah, if we accepted that you're the messenger, we wouldn't be fighting you the whole time. So you're not going to put that in the contract? And the companions say, whoa, what? We're not going to, you're writing the contract. So then the Prophet says, no, okay, erase that and write Muhammad ibn Abdullah, Muhammad the son of Abdullah. Ali says no. Ali says, I cannot do it. I refuse, out of his love for the Prophet, I refuse to remove the name, the Messenger of Allah. I will not do it. So he said, okay, show me where it is. Keep in mind, he cannot, he's illiterate. By the way, for some reason, majority of Western scholars try to show this point that the Prophet is literate. Of course, they have their reasons. But this is a very important, authentic narration. Shows that he had to have it pointed out to him where the actual text was. So he pointed out, he said, this is where it is. He rubbed it out himself, and then he wrote Ibn Abdullah. Okay? Ali wrote that afterwards. After that was done, what takes place? They write the terms of the truce. They write the terms of the negotiation, and there were 4 major points. And we're just going to cover these 4 points and then we'll stop. 4 major points. Point number 1, he says, you cannot perform the pilgrimage this year. But next year, you can come back for 3 days and you can perform an Umrah, a minor pilgrimage. So that's for the Muslims are like, what? That's garbage. We traveled all the way over here and now we have to go back and we come back next year. Number 2, there will be a 10-year truce. Peace for 10 years. And anyone can travel, no, everyone's going to be safe. Number 3, all allies are allies to the truce. Meaning if the Quraysh allies with any tribe, they're part of the truce. If the Muslims ally with any tribe, they're part of the truce too. So we're getting a huge giant truce in the entire continent or subcontinent of Arabia. Number 4, Muslims who are in Mecca, who escape and they try to escape and go and live in Medina, they have to be returned back as prisoners. And Muslims from Medina who escape for some reason, they don't want to be Muslim, and they go to Mecca, they will not be turned back. So it's not vice versa. It's the exact opposite. So any Muslim who escapes from Mecca, he has to be turned back as a prisoner. Any Muslim who escapes from Medina, he's not going to be turned back. He's allowed to go back and live in Mecca as a pagan or whatever it may be. Very unfair treaty, right? But we see that the Prophet ﷺ was under the command of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And we'll talk about this next week, inshallah ta'ala. Any other questions? Okay, inshallah, we ask Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala to help us and guide us in all things that we do. We ask Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala to increase us in our knowledge of the seerah, increase us in our knowledge and in our love of the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam. We ask Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala to free the people who are being persecuted and who are being tortured in Egypt and in Tunisia and in all the other places where there's oppression and there's tyranny and there's injustice. We ask Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala to make us among those people with the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam and his companions in paradise. Ameen. Subhana rabbika rabbil izzati amma yasifun wa salamun alal mursaleen walhamdulillahi rabbil alameen. Wassalamu alaikum.